At 6:03 a.m., my driveway was blocked by a white Escalade idling like an angry beast. Behind the tinted glass sat Karen Nichols, president of the Ridgeview Estates HOA, her face twisted in fury as she screamed into her phone, "If he won't comply, we'll seize the property by force if we have to." Her voice sliced through the morning haze like barbed wire. Two county deputies stood beside her, uneasy, pretending her clipboard made her God. The flashing red and blue lights danced across my porch windows, mixing with the smell of burnt coffee and cheap perfume. My heart stayed steady, because what Karen didn't know was that every lie, every threat, and every forged document was already on record, waiting for the FBI agent who'd be pulling up any minute. What would you do if someone tried to take your home through fraud and intimidation? Drop a comment below. Let me rewind and tell you how this all started. My name's Eli Harper, 49 years old, a master electrician by trade, a mechanic by instinct, and a man who'd spent most of his adult life trying to build something no one could take away from him. After 23 years of marriage and one brutal divorce, I walked away with a pickup truck, my tools, and what little savings hadn't been eaten by lawyers. I could have rented some apartment, stared at beige walls, and pretended I was fine, but something in me refused. I wanted dirt. I wanted quiet. I wanted to wake up to the smell of pine sap instead of car exhaust. So when I saw the listing for my grandfather's old lake house, 2.7 acres of forgotten beauty tucked between Ridgeview Pines and the county line, I knew I had to buy it, even if it meant draining my last dollar. The property had been sitting empty for almost 10 years, weathered but proud. Grandpa built it himself in 1954, every beam cut by hand, every nail hammered by muscle and willpower. The man worked 2 jobs at the foundry, came home covered in soot, and built that house by lantern light. The day I signed those papers, the real estate agent smiled like she was humoring a fool. "You sure you want something this far out?" she'd asked, her tone half disbelief, half pity. I remember running my hand along the porch railing, the wood rough under my calloused palm. "Yeah," I'd said. "This feels right." The title search confirmed what made me grin. The property sat 48 feet outside the Ridgeview Estates HOA boundary. Close enough to see their iron gates and their manicured lawns, but legally out of reach. Freedom with a view of the cage. There was something poetic about that. A blue-collar man living just outside the reach of people who thought their power came from a clipboard and matching mailboxes. The first night I moved in, I stood on the porch and listened. The lake was glass still, moonlight breaking across its surface in shards. Somewhere out in the dark, a loon called. Inside, the cabin smelled like cedar, dust, and motor oil, the same scent that clung to Grandpa's overalls when I was a kid. I could still hear his voice sometimes, that low gravel tone. "Land doesn't make you rich, boy, it makes you free." Back then, I never understood what he meant. Now, standing there surrounded by nothing but water, wind, and memory, I did. For the first time in years, life slowed down. My mornings began with coffee on the dock and ended with a wrench in my hand, fixing what time had tried to break. I rewired the old breaker panel, replaced the copper line to the well, and sanded the porch boards until they glowed honey gold in the sun. I even rebuilt the dock Grandpa had nailed together 60 years earlier. There was a rhythm to it, the hiss of sandpaper, the smell of sawdust, the soft creak of wood expanding in summer heat. I spent 6 months rebuilding my life, piece by piece, like soldering back a broken circuit. Every task was quiet therapy. Some evenings, I'd drive into town, a place where the hardware store still wrote receipts by hand, and grab a beer with the old-timers who remembered my grandfather. They called me the Harper Kid and told me stories about how he used to tow their broken tractors for free. It felt like coming home to a world that still made sense. For the first time since the divorce, I was sleeping through the night. No alarms. No city noise. Just crickets, frogs, and the occasional truck rumbling miles away. Peace felt strange, fragile like glass. But peace never lasts long when there's money and control at stake. I started noticing them in early spring, SUVs rolling slow past my property line, tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. They'd stop for a few seconds, engines idling, then drive off. At first, I thought it was harmless curiosity. My place wasn't exactly a suburban dream home, It was rustic, a little wild around the edges. But then, one morning, I caught sight of a woman standing just beyond my mailbox, clipboard in hand, inspecting my fence like she was evaluating livestock. That's when I first heard the name Ridgeview HOA spoken with that smug reverence people reserve for country clubs. Apparently, Ridgeview's community standards were something of a local religion, and their president, a woman named Karen Nichols, was its high priestess. I brushed it off at first. I wasn't part of their little fiefdom, and I wasn't about to start pretending I was. Still, something about the way those SUVs slowed near my land, like sharks circling a wounded fish, made me uneasy. I didn't know it yet, but that house, my family's sanctuary, the one I thought was finally safe, was about to become the front line of a suburban war. The morning it all began, the air was thick with summer humidity and the scent of pine resin. I was tightening a loose railing on the deck when I heard heels clicking on gravel, an odd sound out here where most folks wore boots. I looked up to see a woman in a navy pantsuit, sunglasses reflecting my cabin back at me, a folder tucked under her arm. Her expression was the kind of polite that hides venom. That was Karen Nichols, and her arrival marked the exact moment peace packed its bags and left my property for good. Karen Nichols, mid-50s. Real estate broker turned self-appointed monarch of Ridgeview Estates. She was the kind of woman who believed a clipboard and a firm tone could rewrite property law. I'd seen her type before, the kind who wore power like perfume, layered, overwhelming, and designed to suffocate everyone around her. The first time she appeared on my land, it was a Friday morning thick with humidity and the smell of fresh-cut cedar. I was patching the dock, knee-deep in lake water, when I heard the distinct crunch of heels on gravel, a sound that didn't belong out here. I turned around, and there she was, standing by my truck like she'd just stepped out of a suburban catalog. Tailored navy pantsuit, pearl necklace, and sunglasses big enough to double as riot shields. In one manicured hand, she clutched a clipboard so thick it could break ribs, and in the other, a branded folder embossed with the Ridgeview Estates logo, a golden oak tree, ironically, considering they'd bulldozed every real one to build their identical McMansions. "Mr. Harper," she called out, her tone a mix of fake warmth and quiet authority, "your property technically affects the aesthetic harmony of Ridgeview Estates. We'll need you to repaint that cabin beige, approved tones only of course." I blinked. "Ma'am, I'm not in your HO." Her smile didn't fade, but something behind it cracked. A flicker, like a light bulb burning out. She took a step closer, the sharp scent of her Chanel No. 5 cutting through the air like ammonia. "Oh, sweetheart," she cooed, lowering her sunglasses. "Boundaries are flexible when community value is at stake." The way she said sweetheart made my jaw tighten. There was something chilling about how casually she dismissed the idea of legal boundaries, like the county line was just a suggestion, and I was a trespasser in her kingdom. She handed me a letterhead document stamped, "Notice of Compliance Concern," and turned on her heel before I could even respond. Her heels clicked like gunshots as she strode back to her white Escalade, the same one I'd later see blocking my driveway, and vanished in a cloud of self-importance. I stood there for a moment, watching dust rise behind her SUV, that paper crinkling in my hand. The letter demanded I submit renovation plans for community review within 14 days. It was so absurd I actually laughed, out loud, standing on my own land. But that laughter didn't last. Because people like Karen don't back down when you ignore them, they escalate. The following week, I started seeing her more often. Sometimes she'd drive by slowly, window cracked, phone camera aimed at my cabin. Other times, I'd find her standing by my fence line, pretending to measure something with a tape measure. Once, I even caught her crouched near my mailbox, claiming she'd dropped something. Each time, I'd remind her calmly, "I'm not part of Ridgeview, ma'am," and each time, she'd tilt her head and smile like she was humoring a misbehaving child. Her voice had that realtor rhythm, a practiced balance of charm and control. Every word felt rehearsed, every smile calibrated to make you doubt your own footing. She spoke in phrases like community harmony, shared vision, and collective responsibility. But what she really meant was obedience. The neighbors worshipped her. Or feared her. Probably both. She chaired every committee, hosted wine nights, and boasted about Ridgeview's 98% compliance rate like it was a military achievement. Under her rule, the HOA wasn't a community, it was an empire of rules, fees, and intimidation. And now she'd found her next target, me. I remember one evening vividly. The air was thick with that post-storm freshness, rainwater dripping from pine needles. I was sitting on my porch when her Escalade rolled to a stop at the end of my drive. She didn't step out this time. Just sat there, engine idling, lights glaring across my property like search beams. For 5 solid minutes, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she raised her phone and snapped a photo of my house before driving off. That was the night I realized this wasn't about aesthetics or property values. Karen Nichols was a control addict, a suburban despot who couldn't stand the idea of someone living freely within sight of her domain. She saw my independence as an insult. My cabin, my freedom, my lack of fear, all of it violated her need to dominate. I should have seen it then, the glint in her eye, the way she smiled when she said, "Boundaries are flexible." That wasn't neighborly concern. It was a warning. A declaration of war wrapped in perfume and pastel paper. That day marked the beginning of a conflict that would rip the mask right off Ridgeview Estates and expose Karen Nichols not as a pillar of community, but as a predator in pearls, hiding a corruption scheme bigger than anyone could imagine. And as much as I hate to admit it, part of me admired her, at least at first. Because it takes a special kind of arrogance to believe you can rewrite the law with nothing but a clipboard and a smile. I didn't know it yet, but she was about to teach me just how dangerous that kind of arrogance could be. That was the first battle shot, the opening move in a war neither of us could walk away from. And looking back, I should have known, Karen Nichols wasn't just a storm in heels. She was a tornado wearing Chanel No. 5, and she'd just set her sights on my land. It started small, or at least small enough that a normal person might have ignored it. A neatly folded paper taped to my mailbox one morning, printed on thick ivory cardstock with the Ridgeview Estates letterhead embossed in gold. Notice of violation, unapproved landscaping. According to the document, my property's unregulated vegetation was negatively impacting neighboring property values. The fine, $500. The irony? My unregulated vegetation was a patch of wild ferns that had been there longer than the subdivision itself. I laughed, tore it down, and tossed it in the burn barrel behind the shed. But the next day, there was another one, this time claiming unauthorized commercial activity because my work truck had my Harper Electrical Services logo on the side. Visible business advertisement in residential zones is prohibited under Ridgeview Code 8.4. The kicker? There was no Ridgeview Code 8.4. Hell, I wasn't even in Ridgeview. Every morning, I'd wake up to the same ritual, the metallic clang of her clipboard echoing faintly through the pines as she and her entourage inspected from the road. Some mornings she'd come alone. Other days she'd bring a pair of men in neon vests pretending to be safety inspectors. They'd stand at the edge of my property snapping photos of my truck, the mailbox, even my dog sleeping on the porch. By the third week, I found a bright orange tag nailed to my fence post, "Unauthorized structure, remove or face penalties." It referred to my grandfather's tool shed, the same one that had stood there since 1956. The paint was faded, the hinges rusty, but it was legal, permanent, and very much mine. Still, the message was clear, she wanted me to bend. Then came the survey incident. One Tuesday afternoon, I noticed a guy in khakis and a polo shirt setting up equipment by my driveway, a tripod with a leveling device, a clipboard in hand. When I walked over, he introduced himself as Rick from Ridgeview Surveying Services. "Just verifying property lines for compliance," he said without looking up. "Compliance with what?" I asked. "I'm not in your HO." He froze. For a fraction of a second, his eyes darted, nervous, cornered. Then he muttered something about routine maintenance and started packing up his gear. I snapped a photo of his truck's license plate as he left. Later, a quick online search revealed no business called Ridgeview Surveying Services existed anywhere in the county. That night, I checked the trail cam I'd mounted by the wellhead. At 11:47 p.m., a figure appeared, male, wearing dark clothes and a Ridgeview jacket. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who thought they had the right to be there. He stopped by the well, pulled out a small notepad, and scribbled something before vanishing into the trees. My first thought was to call the sheriff. My second was hesitation. Out here, law enforcement knew the HOA crowd. They went to the same golf clubs, attended the same fundraisers. When the deputy arrived, I showed him the footage. He watched quietly, arms crossed, jaw tight. Then he sighed, that tired, bureaucratic kind of sigh that said he'd seen this before and didn't want to see it again. "She's well connected, Mr. Harper," he said finally. "Her brother's a county commissioner, and her son-in-law's in zoning enforcement. Best you can do is document everything." That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't random harassment. It was a coordinated squeeze. Karen was testing me, seeing how far she could push before I broke or sold out. Maybe she thought I'd crack, put the house on the market, and let her little empire swallow my land into her HM map. But she didn't understand the kind of man I was. I'd rebuilt this place from the studs up. I'd spent nights soldering circuits until my hands blistered, days hauling lumber until my back screamed. I didn't scare easy, especially not from someone whose biggest hardship was running out of Chardonnay. The following week, things escalated. One morning, I stepped out to find my mailbox ripped open, letters scattered across the gravel like confetti. My utility bill was missing. 2 days later, the power company called, saying they'd received an anonymous request to transfer my account to Ridgeview HOA's management. I shut that down fast, but it confirmed my suspicion. She wasn't just playing neighborhood politics. She was waging economic warfare. Then came the noise complaints. She filed 3 in 1 week: excessive hammering, generator disturbance, and my personal favorite, rooster activity after sunrise. My rooster, Gus, crowed like clockwork at 6:15 a.m., same as he had for years. That never stopped her from standing by her fence at dawn, phone in hand, recording him like she was gathering evidence for a federal trial. And she wasn't alone. Soon, her little entourage, neighbors who owed her favors or feared her wrath, joined in. They'd park near my property line, roll down their windows, and pretend to make calls while filming. One even shouted once, "You'll be gone by winter, Harper. Just sell." But I wasn't going anywhere. I started keeping a logbook, every incident, every fake notice, every drive-by. Dates, times, photos, screenshots. My kitchen table turned into an evidence board, papers stacked, red marker circling names, arrows connecting people. Karen wanted to scare me into submission. Instead, she just taught me how to fight. That night, as I sat on the porch watching the lake reflect the moon, I felt the first spark of anger settle into something colder: resolve. This wasn't just about paint colors or property lines anymore. It was about power, who had it and who refused to kneel to it. And if she wanted a war, I was damn well ready to fight one. When a person like Karen tries to intimidate you long enough, she starts believing you'll never look beyond the surface. That was her mistake. Because the more she pushed, the more I started digging. It began one sleepless night after finding yet another bogus code enforcement notice taped to my front door. The letterhead looked official: embossed seal, county logo, and the phrase Ridgeview Estates Code Enforcement Division printed in bold at the top. It might have fooled someone else. But after 20 years of running electrical permits and seeing real county paperwork, I could tell something was off. The font spacing was wrong, the logo slightly stretched, and the signature line, well, it just didn't look right. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse, walked into the zoning department, and asked to see their file on Ridgeview Estates. The clerk, a woman named Janine with coffee breath and the kind of weariness only public service brings, flipped through her computer and frowned. "Code Enforcement Division?" she muttered. "We don't have a department by that name. Not in Ridgeview, not anywhere." That's when I knew I'd found my first thread. I spent the next week pulling on it. Every notice Karen sent carried the same fake letterhead, the same copied signature from a supposed compliance officer named T. Merritt, a person who didn't exist in county records. When I compared the signatures side by side, I realized they were identical. Scanned, pasted, and reprinted. It wasn't sloppy, it was deliberate. She was manufacturing authority. Then came the kicker. I requested the official parcel maps from the county assessor's office. The Ridgeview HOA boundary ended exactly where it always had, 48 feet short of my property line. But Karen's version of the map, the one she'd been waving around like scripture, told a different story. On her printout, the HOA border had mysteriously expanded westward, straight through my land and into the lake. When I laid both maps side by side on my kitchen table, my stomach sank. Someone had traced the real map, altered the lines, and added a new seal in the corner reading, "Approved by County Development Commission." Except that seal was in grayscale, not the blue embossing every legitimate county document used. I stared at it for a long time before whispering, "You arrogant idiot." Because what she'd done wasn't just a power grab, it was forgery. The next day, I went back to Janine at the courthouse. "Can you tell me who signed off on the Ridgeview boundary amendment?" I asked. She scrolled through her database, squinted, and then looked up sharply. "There's no record of any amendment being filed," she said. "And the signature on that seal, well, that belongs to Commissioner Harold Tully. But he hasn't signed anything for Ridgeview in years. Can you verify that for me?" I asked. 10 minutes later, she printed out the commissioner's actual signature from a recent zoning approval. When I held it next to the one on Karen's fake map, the difference was obvious. The forgery was crude, wrong angle on the T, uneven loops, and the faint pixelation of a copied image. Someone had used Photoshop and a printer to create a false government document. I remember laughing under my breath, a sharp, humorless sound. "Unbelievable," I muttered. She actually forged a county seal. That evening, I drove home as the sun dipped behind the trees, the road glowing gold and red. My hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear but from something else, validation. She wasn't just petty or controlling. She was criminal. Back at the cabin, I cleared my kitchen table and started an evidence board. Each document went into plastic sleeves, fake citations, altered maps, printed screenshots from her HOA website, every email she'd sent. I'd label each one in thick black marker: forgery, fraud, tampering. My table looked like something out of a detective show. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to an old buddy from my contracting days, Tom Riley, who now worked part-time for a surveyor's office. I sent him both maps and asked for his opinion. 2 days later, he called me back, his voice tight. "Eli, whoever made that Ridgeview map isn't just stupid, they're reckless. If the county catches wind of this, someone's losing their license. That's straight-up document falsification." That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I filled out a formal complaint with the State Real Estate and Licensing Board, attaching digital copies of everything I'd found. I mailed it certified just in case. The clerk told me it could take weeks, sometimes months, for an investigator to be assigned. Fine by me. I had patience. But what I didn't realize then was that I had already rattled her cage. Because by filing that complaint, I tripped a wire. Someone in the county office leaked it, maybe a friend of her brother's, maybe one of her donors. Within days, Karen knew exactly what I'd done. The following Monday, I noticed her Escalade parked across from my driveway again, idling as always. Only this time, she didn't get out. She just sat there, staring through those dark tinted windows. No phone, no clipboard, no pretense. And when she finally rolled down the window, her smile was gone. "You think you're clever, Mr. Harper?" she said, voice low and cold. "You've got no idea how deep this goes." She drove off before I could answer, leaving a trail of dust and the faint smell of her perfume hanging in the air. That's when I realized I hadn't just exposed a fraud, I'd declared war. And what came next would make the fake letters and late-night intrusions look like child's play. When you corner a narcissist, they don't apologize, they mobilize. And Karen Nichols had an entire neighborhood to weaponize. It started the week after my complaint reached the state board. Her Escalade disappeared from my road for 3 days, and for a brief, stupid moment, I thought maybe she'd given up. Maybe the reality of what she'd done was finally sinking in. But on the 4th day, I woke up to a different kind of storm. The first clue was the silence. No waves from the neighbors jogging by. No friendly nods from Hank, the mailman. Even the Henderson kids, who used to fish off my dock after school, wouldn't meet my eyes. When I waved, their mother ushered them inside like I'd suddenly turned radioactive. By noon I found out why. Karen had gone door to door, clipboard in hand, telling anyone who would listen that I was a freeloader refusing to pay community dues. She said I'd inherited a property inside Ridgeview's development plan, but was abusing a paperwork loophole to dodge responsibility. It was a lie wrapped in just enough jargon to sound believable. Neighbors I'd known for months, people who'd borrowed tools from me, shared coffee on the dock, started giving me the kind of cold, sidelong glances usually reserved for criminals. Then came the Facebook post. At 7:14 p.m., the Ridgeview Estates community page lit up with Karen's official statement. It read, "Certain property owners believe they're above community law. Ridgeview will defend itself and uphold our standards of integrity. Non-compliance threatens our values, our investments, and our unity." By morning, it had over 300 comments. Half of them cheered her on, calling me a squatter, troublemaker, and one genius even wrote, "If he won't follow rules, evict him." The other half pushed back. People outside the neighborhood who smelled the manipulation a mile away. They called her a tyrant, a control freak, a dictator in pearls. But the damage was done. In a small town, rumors spread faster than wildfire. By the end of the week, I wasn't just an outsider. I was the villain of her carefully crafted narrative. Anonymous flyers started showing up in my mailbox. One read, "Join or leave. Don't ruin what we've built." Another warned, "Ridgeview protects its own." The paper smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and cheap toner. I kept every one of them, filed under intimidation. Even local businesses started acting strange. The hardware store where I'd had a running account for years suddenly required prepayment. My feed deliveries from the co-op were delayed. Someone had called them claiming my farm was under legal review. Everywhere I went, I could feel the shift, like I was walking through fog made of whispers. Then came the burn. It was late October, dry air heavy with the scent of wood smoke. I'd been clearing leaves from the driveway when I caught that smell, sharp, chemical, wrong. Not pine, not oak, plastic. Across the street, a small pile of burning flyers smoldered in a dish. I walked closer and saw my name printed in bold across one of them, "Harper's lies are hurting Ridgeview." Someone had torched them, but the message was clear. They'd picked sides. That night, sitting on my porch under the dim porch light, I could feel the isolation pressing in around me. The lake was quiet, too quiet, like even the frogs knew something was off. The wind carried the faint echo of laughter from a backyard gathering, Ridgeview's harvest mixer, probably. I imagined her there, wine glass in hand, spinning her story to anyone who'd listen. "He's unstable," she'd say. "He's been aggressive toward residents. We're just trying to protect our community." It was propaganda wrapped in charm. And people bought it because it was easier to believe the woman in pearls than the man fixing his fence in the dark. I started seeing her tactics online too. Dozens of fake accounts, clearly coordinated, commenting under my name on local pages, saying things I'd never written. "I'll never pay Ridgeview a cent. You can't stop me." She was manufacturing outrage one post at a time. I tried to defend myself once, posting the actual county boundary map to prove I wasn't part of the HOA. Within minutes, her supporters flooded the comments with accusations of editing and forging documents. The irony was almost laughable, almost. By the second week, the tension had spread beyond social media. I came home one evening to find a dead squirrel nailed to my mailbox. No note, no signature, just a silent threat. I called the sheriff again. He took a report, promised to look into it, then left looking more nervous than helpful. I realized then what Karen had done wasn't just gossip, it was psychological warfare. Ridgeview's jurisdiction stops exactly 47 feet from your west fence. You're clean. I'll certify it, no charge. That night, he brought me a notarized survey with his professional seal, a document Karen couldn't dispute without perjuring herself. It was more than evidence. It was validation. Someone finally believed me. Then came Rita McCall, a journalist from the local Channel 7 News. She'd seen my boundary post online, photos of fake liens, the vandalized fence, and the rule breaker graffiti. Her message was short and direct. Mind if I bring a camera crew? People love HOA abuse stories. The next morning, her white van rolled up my gravel drive, satellite dish glinting in the sun. Rita was brisk, professional, the kind of reporter who smelled both danger and opportunity. Her cameraman, Vince, filmed slow pans of my property, the spray paint, the damaged fence, the stack of fraudulent notices. I told them everything. Not as a rant, but as a record. The harassment, the forgery, the false liens. They listened, nodded, and took notes faster than I could talk. When Rita saw the certified survey Pete had given me, her eyebrows rose. "That's your silver bullet," she said. "Karen's in deep trouble." Within a week, the story aired under the headline, "Homeowner Fights HOA Encroachment, Officials Deny Involvement." The footage was raw. Rita had cut it to look like a David versus Goliath battle. My voice played over shots of red spray paint, sheriff cars, and that white Escalade idling at my gate. The comments section exploded. Tens of thousands of views overnight. Half the town started whispering, not about me, but about her. Behind the scenes, Marianne, my lawyer, was already in motion. She'd been quietly feeding documents to the State Fraud Division, the same agency that handled white-collar real estate crimes. Her contact there, an investigator named Evelyn Brooks, wanted every piece of evidence. The fake lien, the forged plat maps, even Karen's Facebook posts about defending community integrity. By the time Channel 7 aired its follow-up segment, Evelyn had already opened a preliminary case file. Meanwhile, something strange started happening in Ridgeview. People who'd avoided me before now stopped by my fence line, some out of guilt, some out of curiosity. A few apologized for believing Karen's lies. One man, Greg, brought coffee and said, "She fined me for having a red mailbox last year." I thought it was just me. It wasn't just me anymore. By midweek, Karen's empire of intimidation began to fracture. The HOA board called an emergency meeting that turned into a shouting match. 2 members resigned on the spot. Another, a soft-spoken man named Walter, emailed me privately, "She's been forging board approvals. None of us saw those documents you posted." Every lie she'd told was unraveling, thread by thread. Then one night I looked out from my porch and saw headlights parked across the lake. Not Ridgeview Patrol this time. A news van. Rita again, this time doing a follow-up. Her microphone glittered under the streetlight. Sources close to the investigation confirmed that state officials have begun reviewing Ridgeview HOA's financial filings for irregularities, she said. The president, Karen Nichols, has not responded to requests for comment. Hearing her name broadcast on live television sent a thrill through me. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth had finally breached her walls. Over the next few days, the ripple widened. Homeowners from neighboring communities reached out with their own HOA horror stories. Some sent copies of similar forged documents. Others wanted to join a potential class action suit. Marianne's office became command central. Her assistant answered calls nonstop from victims who'd stayed silent out of fear, until now. Pete's survey, Rita's coverage, and Evelyn's quiet investigation had created something powerful, momentum. Karen, of course, tried to fight back. She issued a statement calling me a disgruntled agitator and accused the news of defamation. But every time she opened her mouth, another crack formed in her carefully painted facade. The Attorney General's office didn't issue public comments, but I didn't need them to. Because that night, as I sat under my porch light, watching the reflection of Channel 7's broadcast on my phone, I saw the future unfolding. The woman who tried to seize my home through fear and fraud had finally made the one mistake tyrants always make. She believed her own invincibility. But the walls were closing in. And this time, I wasn't standing alone. When the investigation finally took off, it was like watching storm clouds gather over a field that had been dry too long. You could feel the tension building in the air, that slow, electric hum before the thunder cracks. 2 weeks after Rita's report hit Channel 7, I got a call from investigator Evelyn Brooks at the State Fraud Division. Her tone was calm but edged with excitement. "Mr. Harper, your case has officially been escalated. We're bringing in federal partners. I need you to come downtown with everything you've got." Everything. So I packed it all, every photo, every letter, every video clip and email printout, into a heavy black binder. It felt more like a confession than evidence, like I was handing over months of my life. When I arrived at the field office, Evelyn met me with two others, Special Agent Landry from the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Unit and Assistant U.S. Attorney Crawford, a man with the expression of someone who'd seen corruption in every flavor. They listened as I explained how it started: the forged liens, the fake surveyors, the phantom fines. Then Evelyn slid a folder across the table and said, "You were right. The documents weren't just fake, they're part of a larger pattern." Inside the folder was a list of transactions under the name Clearmark Property Services, LLC. The company was registered to Deborah Monroe, Karen's cousin. According to bank records, Ridgeview HOA had paid Clearmark over $220,000 over the past 3 years for boundary surveys and legal compliance consulting. None of it existed. They'd even found invoices with fake job numbers, referencing inspection sites that were either empty lots or private farmland. And the funds? They came directly from homeowner dues, monthly payments meant for landscaping, maintenance, and insurance. Evelyn leaned forward. Karen was embezzling HOA funds to finance her fake legal actions, and using her cousin's business as the funnel. Agent Landry pulled up an email on his tablet. It was from Karen's HOA address to a county employee in zoning. Expansion incentives available for cooperation on parcel integration. Bonuses can be discussed off-record. It was textbook, calm, procedural, devoid of theatrics. Karen's face went through stages: indignation, confusion, then a collapse into a white-hot panic. Her hand gripped the edge of the table so hard the varnish creaked. She made one last, frantic reach for control, coughing out, "This is political theater. You can't." But the stenographer had already begun recording the exchange in legal shorthand, and the audio backup had locked the phrase, "seize the property by force," into the exhibit list. As they escorted her from the room, a neighbor I recognized, the one who'd quietly stopped mowing my lawn last month, stood near the doorway, his mouth slightly open. The sight of Karen's supporters watching her walk out in handcuffs made something inside me twitch. Not triumph, not yet, but a deep, seismic relief. The pattern of intimidation that had filled my nights with worry had finally been catalogued, labeled, and acted upon. Outside, Rita's camera caught the moment the agents placed Karen into a vehicle. Her pearls glinted under the midday light, a ridiculous, beautiful symbol of a life built on pretending. Marianne put a hand on my shoulder, not in pity, but in hard solidarity. "This is the beginning," she said. "We'll let the evidence speak. You did what you had to do." That night, as I sat on the porch and watched the county lot empty, the lake's surface reflected the sky like a black mirror. The knowledge of what we'd done settled into me slowly. We'd baited arrogance and trapped it in its own words. The legal trap had been set, and Karen, who'd thought her clipboard was a crown, had walked right into it. What would you have said if you'd been in that room? Drop a comment, and stay tuned, because the real reckoning's still coming. The air in the conference room felt different that morning. Heavy, charged, like a fuse waiting to be lit. Everyone knew why they were there, but no one dared to say it. On one side of the polished oak table sat Karen Nichols, her pearls gleaming, her binder clasped like a shield. On the other side sat the state investigators, Agent Landry from the FBI, Evelyn from the Fraud Division, and Assistant Attorney Crawford. I was just a spectator now. My role in this war had already been played. When the door clicked shut, the silence that followed was surgical. Karen cleared her throat, trying to take control. "I hope this farce is brief," she said, her tone crisp. "We have an HOA to run and reputations to protect." Agent Landry didn't respond. He reached into his case, pulled out a thick folder, and began laying out documents: photos, financial statements, bank transfers, notarized papers, each one a brick in the wall she'd built against herself. Evelyn slid one toward her. "Do you recognize this invoice, Ms. Nichols? Clearmark Property Services, $48, $600 for boundary surveys. Karen blinked. Just routine business. Routine? Evelyn's voice was calm, deliberate. Because our forensic accountants found that these funds were redirected into a personal brokerage account in your name 3 days after this invoice was issued. Karen's jaw stiffened. That's absurd. I don't handle the accounting personally. That's when Landry spoke, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that cuts deeper than shouting. Then perhaps you can explain why your digital signature appears on every one of these authorizations. He pushed forward another document. Her name, perfectly looped in blue ink. Karen's face went pale. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights and the mechanical whir of the ceiling vent. She reached for her binder, her last illusion of control, but Landry's hand came down over it like a gavel. Leave it, he said flatly. It's evidence. The binder stayed shut. They continued methodically, each question slicing closer to the truth. Bank ledgers, contractor payments, the forged notary seals from Clearmark, every page traced back to her. Her voice cracked. You can't prove Crawford interrupted her with the faintest hint of a smile. We already have. He nodded toward me. Landry pulled out a small black USB drive, the one I'd handed over weeks earlier, and plugged it into a laptop. The speakers crackled, then filled the room with a familiar sound. Karen's voice, shrill and commanding, recorded from that morning outside my driveway. If he won't comply, we'll seize the property by force if we have to. The words cut through the air like a blade. My heart thudded in my chest, not from fear but from the gravity of it. Hearing her arrogance turned into evidence. Landry paused the playback. That, he said quietly, is what we call self-incrimination. Karen's breath came shallow. Her carefully constructed facade was fracturing. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking ghostly under the harsh fluorescent light. She opened her mouth to protest, but nothing came out. Evelyn leaned in, her voice low but resolute. Ms. Nichols, you are under investigation for wire fraud, embezzlement, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. At this point, you'd be wise to remain silent. The agent stood. Karen froze in her chair, then reached up instinctively to touch her pearls as if they could anchor her. But when the cuffs clicked around her wrists, that metallic clink, sharp and final, her hands fell limp. The room was dead silent except for the rattle of the chain. As she was escorted out, flashes from the hallway cameras painted the walls in bursts of white. Outside, reporters shouted questions, microphones thrust forward, the frenzy of justice unfolding in real time. Ms. Nichols, did you misuse HOA funds? Are you being charged with forgery? Do you have a statement for the homeowners? She didn't answer. She couldn't. I stepped into the sunlight, blinking at the swarm of cameras. The same neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid me now stood whispering in disbelief. Some nodded. Others looked ashamed. The air smelled of cold morning wind and hot asphalt, with just a hint of that bitter metallic tang that follows high tension, the smell of burned arrogance. Marianne joined me on the steps, hands in her pockets, expression unreadable. You did it, Eli, she said. You held your ground.